everyone and welcome to a session on WAT. WAT or the Written Ability Test is one of the selection processes of a lot of B schools these days. Earlier, the GD-PI used to be the two core selection processes. Today, the GD has largely been replaced by a WAT. What is the WAT? What is the Written Ability Test? In simple words, it's an essay. But what does the essay test? You are given a topic, you are expected to ideate, come up with content regarding the topic, express these ideas and structure these ideas in a very logical manner. In other words, it's a piece of your mind or the thought process of your mind regarding a topic that you present on paper here. Now, what was the purpose of the GD? The GD pretty much did the same, except that instead of expressing something on paper, you expressed it aloud to people around you. But the GD offered some challenges in terms of identifying really deserving and competent candidates. Very often in the confusion and the talk by everyone, competent and deserving candidates could be missed out on. Instead, when you get a candidate to express his ideas on paper, I have exactly on paper the way in which he thinks, the structuring of his thoughts and the depth of his ideation. Yes, the Written Ability Test is indeed a way in which your ideation or content, your ability to express it, and the way in which you structure these ideas is tested. Let's look at which are the colleges that make use of WAT these days. All of the IIMs, ABC, LIK, all the new IIMs have this process. XLRI and XIMB in the ZAT, IFT, NIRMA, MDI and even SIBM or TAPMI, all of these colleges do include the WAT process. Now, how exactly is the WAT presented? That is, what kinds of topics are presented? You have plain descriptive topics that can be given. You can have argumentative topics. You can have abstract topics. You can even have picture composition. You are given a picture and expected to write on it. The time normally varies between 20 minutes to a half an hour. And the word limit generally is around 250 to 300 words. The minimum expectation, that is. What are the descriptive topics? For example, GST, socialism versus capitalism, poverty in India, gender-based roles, or impact of social media. Now look at the very general or global nature of these topics. You are not expected to take a stand on these topics. Remember your descriptive RCs, where a holistic presentation of the topic is done. On the other hand, the often asked topics tend to be argumentative. What are these argumentative topics? They contain an inherent stance in them and pose you a question, which means you are expected to take a stand. For example, is education a never-ending process? Is normalization in board exams unfair to brilliant students? Does India need a dictator? Women's reservation bill a myopic decision? Are movies a reflection of our society? Or the problem with the Indian judiciary is incompetent personnel and not incompetent laws? Now, in all these topics, you can see that a question is being posed or a stand is being taken, which means you are expected to take a stand and form an argument regarding the stand. What are the other kinds? Abstract topics. For example, it's 2 a.m. and you hear a dog barking outside and the ellipsis. You continue the narrative. You create a situation. You think of a plot or a situation or a scenario and you create a narrative. Remember, abstract topics are a test of your creativity. How creatively can you think? What can be your sensitivity to things? And how exactly can you put forth a narrative expressing your creativity? Some other examples can be, you are selected for a NASA space program and you continue this idea. There can also be picture composition. Now, picture composition takes a totally different approach. Let's discuss picture composition later. Since the bulk of WAT topics tend to be argumentative, let's understand how to approach them. The time given to you, remember, should be divided into 3 units. The first 2 or 3 minutes of the given 20 minutes should be taken to think and understand the topic and take a stand regarding the topic. The next 13-14 minutes to be used in writing your essay, and the last 2 minutes kept for reviewing or editing the essay. Remember that your expression and the correctness of your expression is just as important as the ideas that you have expressed. Let's understand this process by taking an example. Let's take a topic, is poverty the root cause of corruption in India? Now look at the question. Is poverty the root cause of corruption in India? First of all, let me examine the term corruption. What is corruption? What are the forms of corruption? Corruption is seen in bribery. Corruption can be seen in embezzlement. Corruption can even be seen in favoritism or nepotism, which is giving benefits to one's relatives, one's chosen ones, etc. What are the kinds of corruption that we find? There is petty corruption, which is seen, let's say, among government officials and therefore in government organizations like registration offices, etc., or police station, and therefore seen among other government officials like the police, etc. There is grand corruption, which is seen at the highest levels of governments. There is systemic corruption, which has to do with the inherent defects of the system, which is low pay, lack of transparency, excessive authority given to someone, absolute monopoly given to someone, discretionary powers given to someone, etc. Because of all these reasons, the system itself can be a faulty one. Remember, low pay is just a symptom and not the root cause. Poverty is not the root cause. Poverty is a symptom of the systemic ills of our society. In other words, can I therefore agree with this topic? No, I cannot, because my major reason has to do with the fact that our system is at fault, that the lack of transparency that we have in our system, despite the RTI, despite the right to public services legislation, despite the anti-corruption acts, yes, there is indeed a deep-rooted transparency missing in our system. The absolute discretionary powers given to government officials or political leaders adds to the ills of the system, which means corruption has much to do with the systemic ills of the system. Therefore, I will not want to agree with this topic, rather say poverty is just a symptom and not the root cause. Now, It is only because I have chosen to examine the keywords given in the topic, understand the topic, look at the various reasons involved, that I am able to arrive at this stand. Very often we have our passionate, impulsive response to a topic. For example, I may not be a big fan of gender diversity at workplace, but maybe in saying yes, there should be no gender diversity at certain workplaces, I find no sufficient reasons to have a nice argument built up. I will not want to express this stand. On the other hand, let's say I have 2 or 3 or 4 reasons to support why gender diversity should be encouraged at workplaces. I will certainly take that stand. So once I've taken my stand, I try identifying what could be the possible examples that I will include to support my reason or argument. In this case, I could think of social welfare schemes and their misuse, like the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, or the income tax evasion, or the embezzled funds, or even the National Health Rural Mission, and the gross misuse of all these public welfare schemes. Now that I have my content ready, my stance taken ready, I start writing the essay. Now, what about the format of the essay? Remember that the essay must have an introduction and a conclusion, a brief introduction and a brief conclusion. The reasons, depending on the number of reasons that you have to support your stance taken, can be explained as individual paragraphs after the introduction of your essay. So let's say we've identified one major reason in this case. Now that one major reason is going to be my one paragraph. What can the introduction be like? The introduction can be very general. It could be specifically your understanding of the topic, or it could be a general scenario, or it could even be you defining the terms or the keywords of the topic. In this case, it can be the forms of corruption. What do you mean by corruption, and what are the forms of corruption? How is corruption expressed? Because in your second paragraph, you go on to talk of the kinds of corruption and why. Because India has a systemic corruption, that's why poverty is just a symptom. You will of course provide those various examples that we talked about. If we identify another reason, that becomes my next paragraph. Now my reasons are followed by the conclusion. What is the conclusion? The conclusion is just a few lines which gives a formal closure to your discussion. There needn't necessarily be anything new, anything really impressive that you state in your conclusion. It could even involve repeating the stand that you've taken at the start. It could even involve summarizing in 1 or 2 lines what you've said in the previous 2 or 3 paragraphs. Keep it simple, keep it very brief. What about the language that is used? Keep your language simple. Keep your sentences simple and to the point. Remember, flowery vocabulary and lengthy sentences might just hamper expression of your ideas. And the task here is for you to effectively communicate your ideas. You want the reader to understand exactly what you're trying to say. Avoid complex sentences. Try avoiding jargon. Keep your sentences as simple as possible. But remember, do not use symbols, short forms, or slang and colloquial expressions. Keep your language formal, where you keep the writing engaging, rather conversational, by, say, a question like, do we agree with this? No, we certainly don't, etc. Now that's as far as the language is concerned. At the end of your writing, do remember to spend 2 minutes reviewing what you've written. Revise not just the content, but the language that you've employed, the sentence structuring, spellings, grammar, punctuation, etc. Now, let's quickly examine how do we approach a picture composition. What is a picture composition? A picture given to you and you are expected to write something based on the picture. The composition generally is a narrative. In other words, it more or less ends up becoming a story. For example, let's say the picture is that of Noddy, the cartoon character, or the picture is that of an elephant and a mouse standing at the edge of a forest. Now, for me to weave a story around this picture, I will view this picture as a slide or a screen in the middle of a movie. So, if this is what this slide looks like, what are the various details that led to this particular situation? I try imagining what must have led to this particular situation. What must have brought the elephant and the mouse to the edge of the forest? And thus try to relate not just to the characters but also to their feelings. And now I look at what could therefore this develop as. Where does it come from? That is, what led to this situation? How could this situation develop? What could its logical conclusion be? In developing a story, do justice to the three aspects of the story. 1, the characters. 2, the plot. And 3, the outcome. If your plot requires more characters than are shown in the picture, you may very well use those additional characters. You may choose to not include some characters or some details that are part of the picture. Some details could very clearly be left out. But weave a story around that situation of the picture, but make sure that it leads naturally to a conclusion. Use simple sentences, avoid flowery language, and avoid jargon. A variant of the argumentative topic can be a proper critical reasoning argument given, which contains premises or facts leading to a conclusion. Now, our approach to analyzing this CR argument, critical reasoning argument given, would be to first identify the facts of the situation. That is, what are the details which have led to the conclusion. So in my first paragraph, I identify the premises of the argument and that this is the conclusion. Very often, there are flaws involved in the argument. In the second and third paragraph, I go on to elaborate on the flaws of the argument, the flawed assumptions made. And in the last paragraph, I go on to talk of how instead the entire situation can be addressed. That is, if this is not the right solution to the given problem, what else can be considered? This is more of a typical analysis of an argument, the argument being a critical reasoning argument given. In the last few minutes, we discussed the purpose behind WAT. What does it test? How does it test? That is, the different kinds of topics that I am given. And how do I approach a WAT? How exactly do I write a WAT? Remember, practice is what makes us perfect here. It is not possible for me to overnight ideate and express clearly on a topic. It requires a lot of practice, especially understanding that even while I may have the content on a topic, I may not be able to express the content in a very systematic and logical fashion. That is, how do I put an idea into a sentence? How do I make sentences out of all the ideas? How do I connect sentences to make a paragraph? And how do I connect paragraphs? That requires a lot of practice. do practice the topics that will be displayed on the screen in a while. Happy solving WAT. Thank you so much for having watched this video.